The entire night was consumed by the meticulous crafting of my daughter's wedding gown. Each painstaking stitch was a testament to a sleepless vigil, my eyes unburdened by rest. Every pass of the needle wove a tapestry of recollection, each thread a silent pledge. The clock's rhythmic pulse was my sole companion, its measured cadence marking the hours as if they were the slow unraveling of my own existence. As dawn approached, the first sunbeam, a golden whisper, alighted upon the pristine fabric, signaling the completion of my labor. It was a creation of profound beauty, devoid of the ostentatious sheen of upscale boutiques or the exorbitant prices of haute couture. Instead, it was imbued with the purest essence of maternal devotion, a love that persisted through a lifetime of selfless giving, a belief in its power to mend all wounds. With hands that trembled, I gently encased the garment in an old linen sheet, a protective shroud, and set off to my daughter's home. Upon my arrival, I found Zuri encircled by her friends, their laughter mingling with the clinking of delicate teacups. She exuded an aura of effortless elegance, reminiscent of a distant silver screen icon. A wave of maternal pride washed over me, swiftly followed by an unforeseen event. Zuri's gaze swept over me, her eyes eventually settling on the bundle I carried. "Is that the dress?" she inquired, a hint of disdain in her tone. I offered a nod, a smile playing on my lips, and carefully unfurled the fabric, as if unveiling a long-lost treasure. Her appraisal was fleeting, a mere handful of seconds before a sneer contorted her features. With a dismissive gesture, she let the gown fall. "This looks like something a commoner would wear," she declared, her friends' muffled giggles punctuating her cruelty. Before I could muster a response, she snatched the gown and unceremoniously tossed it into a nearby receptacle. "I am not marrying dressed as a seamstress, mother," she added, her voice dripping with contempt. The air left my lungs in a gasp. Silence descended, a profound, unyielding void. I merely gathered the scattered fragments of my shattered pride from the floor and slowly retreated, my vision blurred by unshed tears. The walk home was a somber pilgrimage. The sun, which had so recently illuminated my creation, now beat down with oppressive intensity, yet I felt only a chilling emptiness. The image of the gown, each stitch a burning ember, remained seared into my mind. I recalled the countless sleepless nights, the years spent hunched over the worn sewing machine inherited from my own mother, the calluses etched onto my hands, the sum total of my sacrifices, offered so Zuri might ascend to her perceived heights. A question gnawed at me. At what juncture did the very essence of love transform into a source of profound shame? Upon reaching my humble abode, I found myself before my sewing machine, its familiar presence now a somber reminder. I gazed at it for an extended period, its usual whirring now sounding like a lament. My fingers brushed against its cool metal, seeking solace in its dormant vibration, when a peculiar impulse stirred within me. It was not grief, but something far more unsettling, a cold, calculated serenity, the kind that settles in the wake of profound heartbreak, not to surrender, but to strategize. Days bled into one another, punctuated by Zuri's utter silence. No call, no apology ever came. Whispers reached me that her designer gown, imported from the fashion capital of Paris, was ready. Perfect, as she had so eloquently put it. But true perfection, I mused, is a soulless construct. No amount of exquisite craftsmanship could imbue that dress with the richness of her story. Then one afternoon, I found myself drawn back to her residence. I bided my time until she was absent, then slipped inside, a silent spectre. The air was heavy with the cloying perfume of opulence and the delicate fragrance of fresh blooms, yet in a shadowed corner the trash receptacle remained, a silent sentinel. There, nestled amongst discarded papers and fabric scraps, lay my dress, wrinkled, stained, utterly humiliated, but undeniably whole, much like myself. I retrieved it with tender care, cradling it against my chest, and carried it back to the sanctuary of my home. I spread it across my workbench, the fading sunlight illuminating its dishevelled beauty. Even in its wretched state, it possessed a profound loveliness, akin to a mother's enduring affection despite profound hurt. As my fingers traced the worn seams, I felt my love still vibrant, emanating from every thread. In that moment, a resolute certainty settled within me. This gown would not remain a casualty of neglect. For the ensuing nights, I retreated to my studio, a self-imposed exile. Sleep became a distant luxury, nourishment a forgotten necessity. My hands were my sole focus, the rhythmic dance of needle and thread my only language. I embroidered delicate crystal blossoms onto the hem, incorporated vintage lace, and within each carefully constructed layer, I concealed more than mere adornment. I infused it with my very history. Each stitch represented a tear shed, each thread a sacrifice made, each flower a day I had felt utterly unseen. As the dress underwent its metamorphosis, so too did I. The meek, subservient mother who bowed to her daughter's contempt was gone. I was now a woman who understood that true love is not about enduring every slight, but about discerning what is intrinsically worthy of preservation. When I finally beheld my reflection, a transformed image stared back. My eyes no longer mirrored sorrow, but a steely resolve. The gown, now radiant under the studio lamp, possessed a brilliance that transcended mere aesthetics. It held the profound resonance of justice. The wedding day dawned, and though I hadn't intended to attend, a curious blend of destiny and self-respect guided my steps. I donned a simple cream-colored dress, secured my hair, and stepped out with an unwavering stride. Each movement was a nascent heartbeat, each breath a silent proclamation. I am no longer the same woman. Arriving at the Grand Magnolia Ballroom in Charlotte, I was enveloped by an atmosphere alive with melody, revelry, and the effervescent sparkle of champagne. Zuri, a vision of radiant beauty, was adorned in her expensive imported gown. She was indeed beautiful, yet there was an undeniable hollowness about her. She failed to notice my entrance, and in truth, I preferred it that way. I remained near the threshold, a silent observer. My hands trembled, not with apprehension, but with the profound weight of the impending revelation. For that evening, my daughter's celebration would transcend mere matrimony. It would serve as an indelible lesson. Precisely at 10 o'clock, I initiated my measured approach towards the room's epicenter. The ambient murmur gradually subsided, replaced by a collective turning of heads. Zuri looked up, her radiant smile dissolving into a mask of shock. In that precise instant, I understood that my entire existence had been a preparation for this singular moment. For it is often through the quiet strength of a mother's love, not through tears, but through a gown that outshines shame, that true lessons are conveyed. Needles have always been my confidants. From the tender age of 12, when my mother first guided my hand to mend a button, I understood that this tactile language would be my voice to the world. Eloquence was never my forte, but my hands possessed the ability to articulate sentiments that my tongue could not. For decades, amidst the silent communion of threads and fabric, I learned that every seam could hold a narrative, indeed, an entire life. When I was widowed, Zuri was a mere 6 years old. The tragic construction accident that claimed my husband Kofi left me a solitary figure, navigating life with a young daughter and a faithful sewing machine. I vividly recall the gem of sorrow, my tears falling by the window. Yet with the dawn, I silenced my grief, started the machine, and began to sew. From that moment forward, each garment that left my studio carried an unspoken promise. Zuri would never know hunger. We resided in a modest apartment situated behind the quaint neighborhood tailor shop where I plied my trade. Zuri's slumber was confined to a small cot, often surrounded by the fabric remnants she would ingeniously transform into makeshift dolls. Watching her play, I held on to the unwavering hope that these sacrifices would one day culminate in meaning, that she would comprehend the profound truth that love, too, could be intricately embroidered. For years, my fingertips bled over the sumptuous fabrics, destined for other women's weddings, silken gowns, imported laces, the materialized dreams of those whose means far surpassed my own. As I meticulously stitched the veils of strangers, I often conjured images of my own daughter's future wedding day. My fervent wish was to fashion for her the most exquisite gown imaginable, not for its perfection, but for the singular element it would undeniably possess, an abundance of love. Upon Zuri's 15th birthday, I managed to acquire her first truly new dress, a garment untainted by second-hand origins or patchworks. It was a celestial blue, adorned with a white ribbon that I had personally embroidered onto the bodice. Witnessing her twirl and dance that evening, a profound sense of fulfillment washed over me. She embraced me tightly, whispering, "You are the best mum in the world." Those words became an indelible imprint, a cherished mantra, unknowingly destined to echo as a poignant, broken promise in the years to come. As Zuri matured, a subtle yet discernible drift commenced, pulling her away from the world that had shaped our shared existence. She pursued higher education in the city, a feat made possible by a modest business loan I secured by parting with my old car. She excelled in her studies, advanced in her career, and encountered a new social stratum. Her return was marked by an unsettling unfamiliarity. Her voice had undergone a transformation, and her gaze carried a new, distant quality. The familiar endearment of mama had been replaced by the formal mother, and with each interaction I observed a subtle interplay of annoyance and shame flicker across her face. Initially, I dismissed these observations as mere figments of my imagination. However, the signs were undeniable: unanswered calls, increasingly brief visits, and a particularly piercing remark made without even meeting my eyes. "I wish you had been able to pursue a formal education." That sentence struck me like a sharp needle, for in its unspoken subtext, she conveyed that the love I had so freely given was insufficient, that my hands, the very instruments that had clothed her childhood, held no currency in her new world. Nevertheless, when she announced her impending marriage, a surge of pure, unadulterated joy coursed through me. I envisioned this as the moment to finally bestow the gift I had envisioned for so many years, her wedding gown. I offered to create it myself, and despite a flicker of hesitation, she ultimately acquiesced. I interpreted this as a gesture of reconciliation, an opportunity to mend the frayed tapestry of our relationship. That night, I settled before the sewing machine, my heart filled with a silent prayer. "Lord, guide my hands, let every stitch be a blessing." I dedicated entire days to the painstaking selection of fabrics within my financial reach: ivory lace, ethereal tulle, and delicate pearls, remnants of a client's payment. Each thread was imbued with a fervent wish, each fold a concealed tear, and within the hidden lining, accessible only to me, I secreted a tiny fragment of my own wedding dress. It was my unspoken declaration, a silent plea: "Take me with you, daughter. Even if my presence is no longer acknowledged, I will remain." Yet, when the creation was complete and subsequently rejected, it was not merely the dress that was discarded. It was my entire narrative, my love, the invisible thread that had long bound us. That night, sleep eluded me. I sat vigil, my gaze fixed on the silent sewing machine, my thoughts drifting to my own mother. I remembered her own tireless dedication, her words of wisdom echoing in my mind. Daughter, women like us possess no swords nor fortunes. Our strength resides in our hands. And in that profound moment of introspection, I grasped a fundamental truth. My strength was not contingent upon acceptance, but in my unwavering capacity to continue weaving my own destiny, even when it was repeatedly unraveled. I reached out to touch the stained fabric I had rescued from the refuse. My fingers traced the torn seams, and I felt the unyielding pulse of my love still beating within it. Memories flooded my consciousness, the countless embraces offered without reciprocation, the awkward silences, the stinging admonishments of Mom, please don't come dressed like that. And then a profound realization dawned. Humiliation, when tempered with patience, could indeed become a potent teacher, for pain rather than destroying possesses the transformative power to reshape us. That profound transformation had already begun. In the days that followed, a palpable shift occurred within me. My sewing took on a new purpose, no longer driven by her needs, but by my own. Each stitch became a balm, a salve for my wounded spirit. The thread flowed with an almost sentient grace, as if the machine itself understood the depths of my soul. I was no longer merely embroidering a gown, I was meticulously stitching the fabric of my own liberation. And though Zori remained oblivious, I harbored a meticulously crafted plan. On her wedding day, she would wear the dress of her choosing, but the memory that would linger, the one that would be etched into the minds of all present, would be that of the gown she so callously scorned. For some affections fade into oblivion, while others are avenged with an exquisite grace, and mine, I knew, was poised to shine. The wedding day dawned under a canopy of somber grey skies. The air, though devoid of rain, carried the electric tang of an impending storm, as if the very world sensed an imminent rupture. I donned the only respectable attire I possessed, the very same ensemble I had worn to my mother's funeral, and meticulously styled my hair. This was not an act of vanity, but a deliberate preparation to confront my past with an unyielding dignity. The meticulously restored gown, carefully folded within a white linen bag, was a clandestine charge, guarded with the precision of one concealing a profound secret. It was neither a gift nor a passive complaint, it was a carefully orchestrated response, a silent rejoinder to a daughter who had forgotten the intrinsic value of loving without shame. As I stepped outside, a forceful wind whipped around me. I made my way to the bus stop, my hands tightly clasping the bag, as if it contained the very essence of my heart. The journey to the event venue was protracted, each turn of the road conjuring vivid recollections of moments when Zuri and I had been a singular entity, when laughter flowed effortlessly, when her embraces were unburdened by any concern for appearances. These memories, however, now inflicted a deeper sting than any needle. The wedding ballroom was an edifice of grandeur, adorned with gilded columns and a ceiling that soared into the heavens. White lights cascaded like a celestial waterfall. Exotic floral arrangements perfumed the air, and champagne glasses gleamed on every table. It was a scene of impeccable yet hollow perfection. I paused at the entrance, observing for a few moments the convivial atmosphere, the toasts, the snapshots being captured. Zuri stood at the heart of it all, resplendent in her new gown, a garment that, despite its considerable expense, failed to mask the chilling void in her eyes. Her smile faltered as she saw me approach. Before I could reach her, a woman, presumably the groom's mother, intercepted my path with a strained smile. You must be Zori's mother, correct? She inquired. I offered a nod. Ah, it's lovely to meet you, she remarked, though her tone betrayed a distinct lack of sincerity. Could you perhaps wait a moment further back? We're about to commence the family photographs. Her gaze swept over me, a judgmental assessment that carried more weight than any spoken word. The same silent judgment I had endured countless times, and I complied. I retreated to the periphery near the velvet curtains, a spectral presence at my own daughter's celebration. Throughout the ceremony, I received little acknowledgement. Some offered perfunctory greetings, while others outright ignored me. Zuri made no effort to introduce me. On that day, I was not her mother. I was merely an inconvenient remembrance, a memory she preferred to keep hidden. The music swelled, the couple took their first dance, and the room erupted in applause. I joined in, but my hands trembled, not with sentiment, but with a controlled surge of indignation. I watched my daughter embrace her new husband, radiating an almost arrogant confidence, as if her life had finally reached its zenith. For a fleeting moment, I questioned if she had forgotten who had steadfastly supported her when life threatened to break her, who had taught her the art of resilience, who had stitched her first dress, who had transformed tears into unwavering hope. And then the truth solidified within me. She hadn't forgotten, she had merely chosen to deny it. For sometimes the weight of love becomes so burdensome that it is easier to bury it than to acknowledge its profound presence. I resolved to linger a while longer, not to observe her, but to understand. I yearned to pinpoint the precise moment my daughter had ceased to be my daughter. One of the bridesmaids approached with a tentative smile. "Can I get you anything, ma'am?" she inquired. "Just observing," I replied. "Observing what?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. "How a mother is forgotten," I stated softly. The young woman lowered her gaze, seemingly at a loss for words. I offered a serene smile. There was no trace of anger in my voice, only an ancient, profound sadness that had long since abandoned the quest for blame. As the clock struck midnight amidst the swirling dances and the enveloping music, I rose and made my way toward the center of the ballroom. The gown was in my hands, and as eyes turned toward me, one by one the room's animated chatter gradually hushed. Zuri turned, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning dread, her face draining of color. "Mom, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice laced with nervousness. "Please sit down." "I have merely come to return something that rightfully belongs to me," I declared, presenting the white bag. The hushed murmurs swelled, a cacophony of whispers, some punctuated by stifled laughter, others by stunned silence. I delicately opened the bag and revealed the dress, the very same gown she had once scorned as befitting only the poor, but it was no longer recognizable. It radiated light. The ballroom's illumination glinted off the countless tiny stones I had painstakingly embroidered, and the restored lace seemed as though it had been woven by celestial hands. It was a garment fit for royalty. The silence in the room was absolute. Zuri recoiled slightly, her eyes welling with tears, and for the first time in a long time, the cause was not my doing. "What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "Your dress, daughter, the one you so readily discarded. But it is beautiful, is it not?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "I transformed it just as I transformed myself. You cast it aside, but I could not, for there are certain things a mother will never abandon, even when they are met with contempt." The assembled guests held their collective breath. I held the dress aloft, extending it for all to behold. "This dress," I announced, my voice resonating with quiet conviction, "was not fashioned with money, but with sacrifice. It is a testament to the nights I sacrificed sleep, to the years I refused to surrender. Every thread within it carries my story, every stitch bears my name. Zuri covered her face with her hands. Mum, please stop. No, daughter, I countered. Stopping is what I told myself when I witnessed your shame of me. Today I have not come to lament. I have come to remind you of your origins. Suddenly, a tentative applause began, gradually swelling into a powerful ovation. The bridesmaids, the guests, even the groom's mother all joined in. Zuri collapsed to her knees, her sobs racking her body. I looked at her not with triumph, not with resentment, but with a profound serenity I had not previously known. I approached her, cupped her face gently in my hands, and whispered, "There is no shame in humility, my child. The true shame lies in forgetting who taught you to soar." She nodded through her tears, attempting to embrace me. I gently stepped back. "Not yet," I told her softly. "Not until you comprehend the true meaning of love." I turned, holding the gown, and walked toward the exit, the sound of applause following me. Each step was a finality, each glance a closing scar. And as I crossed the threshold, I knew with unwavering certainty that something had irrevocably ended. I was no longer the shame-ridden mother who toiled in silence. I was a woman who had discovered that dignity too is meticulously sewn, stitch by painstaking stitch. That night, as I departed the ballroom, the gown cradled in my arms, the air felt newly mine. The moon, like an ancient lantern, hung suspended in the night sky, its light reflecting off the lace, imbuing it with an ethereal glow. Outside there was no music, no applause, only the profound quietude of a woman who had spoken her truth without raising her voice. I walked slowly back to my home, each footfall on the deserted street echoing like another stitch, closing the wound my daughter had inflicted. Tears were beyond me. I had wept enough over a lifetime. My heart ached, not from sorrow, but from sheer exhaustion. Upon my arrival, I hung the gown before the mirror. It was exquisite, far too beautiful to have inspired contempt. Yet an untold secret remained, known only to me, perhaps even to Zuri. Hidden within its folds lay more than mere thread and embroidery. There was a concealed truth. Weeks prior to the wedding, when I rescued the dress from the ignominy of the trash, I had undertaken more than a simple restoration. I had transformed it into a silent missive. Within the lining, woven between layers of tulle and lace, I had meticulously sewn small handwritten notes, carefully folded fragments of my life, her childhood, my very soul. One note read, "Upon your birth, I believed life had restored what it had taken. I never fathroned that love, when given in such abundance, could also inflict such pain." Another held a representation of her first dress, fashioned from discarded fabric, but stitched with a heart brimming with hope. "I never imagined," I had written, "that you would one day be ashamed of the love that shielded you." And in the final, smallest, most secret compartment, I placed a phrase that had been my mother's. "The thread that binds a mother and daughter is never broken. It merely stretches until one learns to release." Whether Zuri would discover these notes, whether she would ever summon the courage to open the gown, remained an uncertainty. Yet I had acted, for sometimes words must be sown to blossom when silence proves insufficient. In the ensuing days, the wedding became the dominant topic of conversation throughout the neighborhood. Some offered congratulations, while others sought to pry. I received their inquiries in silence, continuing my work in the solitude of my studio. The subject was not one I relished discussing, not out of shame, but because I knew the true resolution was yet to unfold, and it arrived sooner than I had anticipated. 3 days later, Zuri appeared at my doorstep. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, and her voice was fractured. "Mum, can we talk?" I remained still, a primal instinct urging me to wait. "Of course," I replied, my voice calm. She entered tentatively, as if the very walls of the house might reject her. She sat in the chair where she had so often waited for me to finish sewing her uniform, a dress, a life. In her hands she held the gown. She placed it on the table, her gaze averted. "I opened it," she confessed. I found your letters." The silence was punctuated by her ragged breaths. For the first time I witnessed her vulnerability. The haughty woman from the wedding was gone, replaced by the little girl I remembered. "I was unaware," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I had no comprehension of the extent of your sacrifices for me." My eyes dropped, unable to meet hers. "You did not need to know. Mothers do not tally their efforts, they simply persevere. I was such a naive soul, Mum." "No, my child," I responded, my own voice gentle. "You were merely human, and a measure of pride, much like the shade of your eyes, is something passed down through generations." Zuri succumbed to a flood of tears, her body shaking. She knelt beside me, a posture reminiscent of her childhood when she sought comfort. Her hands clasped mine, and I felt their tremor, a mirror of my own. "Please forgive me." "There is no need to seek absolution," I assured her. "What you truly require is understanding." We remained in that quiet embrace. My tears did not fall, for genuine forgiveness, when finally embraced, does not inflict pain. Instead, it bestows a profound sense of release. Zuri laid her head upon my lap, and for a fleeting moment I felt the familiar weight of her youth return. The same comforting warmth, the same tender vulnerability. It was as if the intervening years had been unwound. After a span of quiet contemplation, she lifted her head. "May I stay with you for a few days?" she inquired. "Absolutely," I replied, a smile gracing my lips. "However, you must contribute to the household. There will be mending, cleaning, cooking, and simply living." That evening marked our first shared meal in years. The silence that had once been a chasm between us was now a soothing presence, a comfortable necessity. Zuri ate with quiet reverence, her gaze occasionally falling upon me as though she were encountering a stranger. "I always perceived you as fragile," she confessed unexpectedly, "and now I realize you were simply exhausted." "Indeed, my daughter," I affirmed with a smile, "even love can wear one down." The following morning, while Zuri slept soundly, I retrieved the cherished gown and carefully placed it within a wooden chest. My intention was not to preserve it as a trophy, but as a testament, a tangible representation that even the most fractured connections can be meticulously repaired, provided one possesses the fortitude to acknowledge their scars. Before sealing the chest, I added a final handwritten note. "When you eventually read this, I may no longer be present. However, I wish for you to carry with you the understanding that humility is not an inherited trait, it is cultivated. And you, my dearest daughter, have already taken the crucial first step in this journey." I closed the chest with deliberate care and placed it in the closet, beside my collection of threads, my needles, and the lingering scraps of blue fabric from the dress she wore at her 15th birthday. All that had once constituted the fabric of my existence, all that had defined me, now resided in that quiet, unassuming corner. And for the first time in a multitude of years, a sense of peace settled within me. Not the peace of forgetting, but the profound tranquility of one who has meticulously reassembled their very soul, leaving it whole, with the acknowledgement of its mended imperfections. The days that followed, filled with Zuri's presence, were unlike any we had experienced before. For the first time in years, we shared breakfasts, engaging in conversations, and experiencing silences that no longer caused discomfort. I continued my work in my studio, while she sat by the window observing my every move. Occasionally, she would awkwardly join me in my craft, her fingers pricking themselves, her laughter mingling with tears as a stray thread escaped her grasp. It was as if I were witnessing the resurgence of the young girl who once questioned why my dresses, though devoid of sparkle, were invariably the most beautiful. Yet serenity, much like all of life's fleeting gifts, rarely endures when unresolved afflictions persist. One afternoon, as we were occupied with household chores, the telephone rang. Zori dried her hands and answered the call. Her expression underwent an immediate transformation. "It's Amani Ellington," she murmured, her voice laced with a tremor. The mother of her husband, the same woman who had regarded me at the wedding as if I were part of the hired staff. Zuri listened intently, her head nodding with an almost imperceptible nervousness. Upon concluding the call, she relayed the information in a subdued tone. "She is coming for dinner tomorrow evening. She mentioned she wishes to speak with both of us." The ceramic mug I held slipped from my grasp, crashing to the floor and fragmenting into numerous pieces. "With me?" I inquired, my voice betraying a hint of disbelief. "Yes, Mum. She stated it is important." "Then let her come," I declared with a newfound firmness, "but she must arrive with honesty, not merely with polite pretenses." That night, sleep eluded me, not from fear, but from a disquieting premonition. There was an element about Imani Ellington that felt inexplicably familiar, a detail I could not quite pinpoint. I occupied the hours meticulously preparing the dining table, polishing the silverware, and arranging a modest dinner, not out of a desire to placate her, but because good breeding, even when disregarded by others, remains an inherent virtue. As the clock chimed 8, the resonant sound of the doorbell shattered the house's quietude. Zuri opened the door. The woman entered enveloped in an opulent coat and a perfume of excessive strength, one of those fragrances that attempts to mask the lingering scent of the past. "Good evening," she offered, her gaze barely skimming over me. "Good evening," I reciprocated. "Please come in." We seated ourselves at the table. For the initial moments, a profound silence prevailed. Zuri feigned a composed demeanor, yet her hand trembled noticeably against her napkin. Imani idly toyed with the silverware, her eyes deliberately avoiding mine. I patiently waited, for I understood that truths, no matter how long concealed, eventually reveal themselves. "I presume you do not recall me?" Imani finally began. "No, ma'am," I responded. "However, my memory does not falter when it comes to voices that wound, and yours at the wedding was strikingly clear." Zuri pressed her lips together in a tight line. The woman sighed, her gaze descending. "You are correct, and it is precisely for that reason that I have come." A significant silence ensued, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the clock. She continued. "Many years ago, when I was a young woman, my mother employed a seamstress, a woman who possessed an unparalleled skill with needle and thread, despite her modest charges. I was exceptionally arrogant and treated her with utter disdain. I demanded the impossible, compelled her to wait for extended periods to receive payment, and at times I neglected to compensate her altogether. Until one day that woman vanished from the shop. I later learned she had been widowed and was left with a young daughter. My hands went cold, my heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" I demanded. The woman met my gaze, her eyes glistening with moisture. "That woman was you." For an instant the world seemed to cease its motion. I vividly recalled that tailor shop from so many years ago. I remembered her youthful countenance, her opulent jewelry, her imperious tone. "Yes," I confirmed, "it was she, Mrs. Ellington, the very same woman who subjected me to humiliation over a single misplaced stitch and dismissed me without a single coin." "I was unaware," I whispered, the words more for myself than for her. "But you were aware," Imani replied, "the day of our children's wedding. When I saw you in the ballroom holding that gown, I recognized you immediately. However, I lacked the courage to approach you, for shame weighs far heavier than any material wealth. Zuri looked at me with an expression of profound horror. You worked for her, Mum? I nodded. Yes, my child, and it was from her pronouncements that I learned the vital lesson of never allowing myself to be subjected to such indignity again. Imani bowed her head in humility. I have come to seek your forgiveness, Afia. You cannot fathom the burden of guilt I have carried. I once believed that wealth afforded me a superior standing, but when I observed you that evening in the ballroom with that dress in your hands, I understood that I had spent my entire existence silently yearning for something I could never attain. Dignity. Zuri wept silently. I drew a deep breath, gazing at this woman who had inflicted such profound pain upon me, and for the first time I did not perceive an adversary. I saw an individual who, much like my own daughter, had been led astray by the very pride that had ensnared them. Forgiveness is not merely requested through words, Mrs. Ellington, I stated calmly. It is demonstrated through actions. I understand that is precisely why I have come. And what precisely do you propose to do now? To help, to assist you in what? In establishing your own studio. Zuri looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. My mother, a studio? Yes, Imani affirmed. With your remarkable talent, you possess the capacity to guide other women. I can provide the necessary capital, not to alleviate my own conscience, but to channel resources towards a constructive endeavor, repurposing that which I once used for humiliation. I regarded her in silence. A part of me recoiled at the prospect, yearning to reject her offer outright, to vocalize that absolution cannot be purchased with money. Yet another, more discerning part, the part that had learned the art of mending wounds, whispered that sometimes accepting assistance is, in itself, an act of profound self-compassion. Very well, I finally conceded. I accept, but under one condition. Anything you wish, Imani readily agreed. The studio will bear my mother's name. And what was her name? Hope. Because that, my dear, was the singular attribute I never relinquished. Zuri rose from the table and embraced me tightly. Mum, I find this hard to believe. You must believe it, my child. Life does not always present opportunities for retribution, but it often completes its cyclical journey. And at times, as the wheel of fortune turns, seamstresses impart wisdom to queens, guiding them in the art of mending their very souls. Imani nodded, tears streaming down her face. You are absolutely right. Wealth is ephemeral. Dignity is an inheritance, and humility, I added, cannot be washed away by currency. It is earned through our deeds. The dinner concluded with a different quality of silence, the profound quietude of elements finally finding their rightful place. Before her departure, Imani extended her hand. Thank you for allowing me into your home. Thank you for having the courage to return, I replied. As the door closed behind her, Zuri turned to me, her eyes brimming with admiration. Mum, I had no idea you possessed such strength. No, my child, I am not inherently strong. I have merely learned that the most resilient stitches are those woven after one has experienced being broken. The following night, after that significant dinner, my slumber was restless. It was not born of guilt or anticipation, but rather an unsettling intuition. There was an indefinable element in Imani Ellington's narrative that did not quite align. Her overt interest, her pronounced remorse, and the pronounced delay in her revelation all seemed out of sync. I awoke before the first hint of dawn. The air carried the scent of damp earth, and the birdsong, distant and ethereal, sounded as if it originated from another realm. I poured myself a cup of coffee, and while the house remained enveloped in slumber, I retrieved the gown chest, opened it, and traced the intricate lace with my fingertips. my touch lingering on the notes I had carefully concealed within the lining. My thoughts drifted to my mother, her voice echoing in my memory. Truths, my child, are not unearthed. They are meticulously unraveled. And for reasons I could not articulate, that particular phrase remained with me throughout the day. Imani reappeared a week later, documents clutched in her hand and a carefully manufactured smile adorning her face. "I have the studio contract. Afia," she announced. "So soon, I have no desire to prolong this. I have given considerable thought to all of this." Zuri observed us from her place at the table, her expression a complex mixture of joy and apprehension, a duality only children can truly convey when witnessing their mothers confront old emotional wounds. "Let us be seated," I suggested. Imani unfolded the documents, her words detailing loans, machinery, the physical space, and prospective employees. I offered a nod of assent, yet an unsettling dissonance in her tone resonated with me. It was not solely regret I detected, but a palpable sense of fear. "What is the urgency, Mrs. Ellington?" I inquired. "Urgency? No, I simply wish to conduct matters correctly. I'm not referring to the studio. I am referring to you." I met her gaze directly. "You have something you have not yet disclosed." Her complexion paled. She lowered her gaze, her hands trembling noticeably on the tablecloth. Zuri frowned, her brow furrowed in confusion. 30 years ago," she began, her voice quivering, "my mother did not merely employ seamstresses. She also harbored secrets. I was young, impulsive. I lived a life of comfort, yet it was profoundly hollow. And then I encountered a man." A visceral chill coursed through my body. I knew, without any conscious reasoning, to whom she was referring. "His name was Kofi Bakari," she stated, and the coffee caught in my throat. My breath hitched. That was the name of my late husband Zuri's father. "What are you implying?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "What I should have conveyed to you many years ago," Imani responded through a cascade of tears. "Your husband worked at my mother's establishment before he married you. He was a man of noble character, quiet and unassuming, and I found myself falling in love with him." Zuri gasped, her body jolting in her chair. "What?" "I never confessed my feelings to him," Imani continued. "I never sought him out after he married you, but the day he passed away, I was present." The atmosphere grew heavy. Zuri turned to me, her eyes wide with horror. "What does that signify, Mum?" I found myself utterly incapable of speech. Imani continued, her words punctuated by sobs. "I went to the hospital because I had learned of his passing through a mutual acquaintance. I arrived too late. I only witnessed them preparing to move him. He was holding an envelope in his hand, an envelope addressed to you, Afia." My vision blurred. For years I had harbored the belief that Kofi had left nothing behind, that his death had been as abrupt as his silence. "An envelope," I whispered. Imani nodded. She retrieved a faded, meticulously folded piece of paper from her purse. "I kept it. I was uncertain whether I should deliver it. I feared you would despise me, but after the wedding I realized I could no longer retain this." My hands trembled as I accepted it. The paper was yellowed, its edges worn. I opened it with deliberate care. Inside, Kofi's handwriting remained as firm and unmistakable as ever. "Afia, if you are receiving this, it means I did not have the opportunity to impart what you rightfully deserve to hear. I was not a good husband nor a good father, but there is something you remain unaware of. Before you, I committed errors. One of them has continued to haunt me to this very day. Should a woman named Imani Ellington ever present herself, do not harbor animosity towards her. Simply convey that I have forgiven her, for she too was a victim of the same misplaced pride that ultimately led to my downfall." The paper slipped from my grasp. Zuri retrieved it and read it in silence. tears silently tracing paths down her face. I stood gazing at Imani, who was weeping, her hands resting in her lap. In that moment, all the disparate pieces of the puzzle coalesced: the humiliation, her profound remorse, her insistent desire to atone. It was not merely guilt that motivated her, it was a quest for redemption. My mother inflicted considerable harm upon many individuals. Afia, Imani confessed through her sobs, and I followed her example until I saw you that evening in the ballroom, your gown in your hands. I understood that I too needed to seek forgiveness for the transgressions inherited. I rose slowly. Anger was absent from my heart, replaced by a profound sorrow, for life possesses peculiar ways of intertwining the very threads we sever with animosity. "And why did you not inform me sooner?" I inquired. "Because the timing was not yet appropriate," she responded. "Because one cannot truly seek absolution until they can meet the gaze of the individual they have wronged." Zuri stood, her body trembling. "Then my husband's father—" "No," I interrupted her gently. "That has no bearing on you, my child. Your father was mine. His past is not ours to claim." I embraced her, and for the first time I felt as though we were closing a cycle that had been bleeding for decades. "Mrs. Ellington," I finally stated, "if your intention was to seek forgiveness, you have achieved it. However, we require nothing further. We can proceed with opening the studio, but not as a means of absolving guilt. We shall open it to impart to other women the understanding that the past is not eradicated by opulence or by tears, but by purpose." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "Thank you, Afia. And if you genuinely wish to honor my husband's memory, do not forget this," I added. "Wounds are not concealed with silk. They are mended with truth." That evening, after her departure, Zuri stood gazing out the window. "Mom, all that you have lived through, all that you have endured, it was for love, wasn't it?" "Yes, my child, but not solely for your father's sake, but for yours as well. Because one day I comprehended that a mother's love is the only form that requires no external validation." She rested her head against my shoulder, and in that shared silence, I grasped the understanding that sometimes justice is not achieved through clamor or vengeance, but through the tranquil realization that truth, however agonizing, ultimately liberates. The following week, as the emotional storm seemed to have subsided, I received a letter. It was from an estate lawyer in the city. On the envelope, my name was inscribed in an elegant, old-fashioned script, Afia Bakari. For a fleeting moment, my heart seemed to cease its beating. It had been years since I had seen that surname appended to my own. Kofi had departed from my life in numerous ways, initially through silence, then through his absence, and now, even from beyond the grave, he seemed to be communicating with me once more. The envelope possessed a weight that felt disproportionate to its size. With trembling hands, I opened it slowly. Inside, I discovered a sealed letter and a small brown envelope secured with wax. Zuri was beside me, and observing my pallor, she inquired, "Mum, are you all right?" "I cannot be certain," I replied. "However, it appears your father did not depart with everything." We sat down together. I slid my fingers over the letter, drew a deep breath, and opened it. Kofi's voice, preserved within those lines, still retained a warmth, as if time had ceased to flow. "Afia, if this letter has found its way to you, it signifies that something I was unable to resolve in life has finally come to light. I never possessed the eloquence to articulate my apologies through words, yet you always intuitively understood the language of silence, and it is for this reason that I entrust you to discern the unspoken sentiments within what I leave behind. I did not bestow an effortless existence upon you, but I hold the hope that, at the very least, this legacy will provide you with something far more valuable than mere wealth: truth." Within the confines of the brown envelope, you will find documents pertaining to an account I never disclosed to you. It is not substantial in value, but it was accumulated through the labor of my own hands, untainted by any impropriety. It is intended for you and Zuri, so that you may never again be compelled to rely on the pity of others. But above all, there is one further item, a journal. Within its pages, I have chronicled all that I was unable to articulate to you and all that I gleaned from observing your capacity for love, even when your affection was not reciprocated. If you should recall me, do so not for my failings, but for the essential stitches that life compelled us to weave together. I remained motionless, my gaze fixed upon the written words. It was the first instance in years that I felt Kofi speaking to me from the depths of his soul, devoid of excuses or pretense. Zuri embraced me tightly. "Mum, Dad loved you." "Yes," I responded, my tears held in check, but he did not know how. The brown envelope contained a journal bound in worn leather, its corners softened with age. Within its pages lay script, somewhat untidy, as if penned at various junctures throughout his life. The initial entries spoke of our initial encounter, my laughter echoing in the studio, how my method of sewing made him feel a profound sense of belonging. Subsequently, the pages darkened, filled with frustration, guilt, and his pervasive fear of inadequacy. I cannot bear to witness the world's scorn towards her for her humility. She sews as if she is mending the very universe with each stitch, and all I am capable of is to dismantle that which she meticulously repairs. We read in shared silence until we reached the concluding pages. His tone had shifted, seemingly written during his final days, when illness had taken its toll. "Should you ever feel adrift, a fear, seek out the crimson thread. It resides within the drawer of our old dwelling, where you used to store the studio fabrics. That particular thread was the very first one you employed to fashion Zuri's dress. I preserved it. I never conveyed this to you, but when my gaze fell upon that thread, I was reminded of why everything held profound significance. That thread, my dearest love, is the sole remaining filament that continues to connect me to you." I was unable to sleep that night. I activated the bedside lamp and retrieved the antique box where I kept the remnants of vintage fabrics. And there it was, the crimson thread, the very same one I had utilized to meticulously repair Zuri's christening gown, the identical thread with which I had sewn my own wedding veil. I held it between my fingers, my tears flowing uncontrollably. It felt akin to holding the very pulse of the past, as if my entire life had been intricately braided into that singular thread. Zuri awoke upon hearing my quiet weeping. She discovered me on the floor, the open box at my side. "What is it, Mum?" I showed her the thread and her expression softened. "Dad." "Yes," I whispered, "he kept it all this time." Zuri embraced me, and for the first time I understood that love, even in its imperfect manifestations, leaves behind subtle clues, like breadcrumbs scattered along a treacherous forest path. All that is required is the courage to follow them. Days later, Amani visited the studio. I had not seen her since the revelation concerning Kofi. She carried a bouquet of flowers and bore a weary expression. "I came to assist you with the contract," she stated. "It is no longer necessary. The studio will open regardless, but under different terms." "Different?" I inquired. "Yes," I replied. "I shall not proceed out of mere charity or a sense of obligation. I will do so from a place of dignity." I recounted the details of the letter, the crimson thread, and Kofi's final message. She wept. "He wrote me a letter as well," she confessed, "but I never summoned the resolve to read it." "Then read it," I urged, "for the departed do not find rest until their truths are finally acknowledged." The day we inaugurated the studio was bathed in brilliant sunshine. The local women, modest residents of the West End, emerge from their homes, drawn by curiosity. Some carried fabric scraps, while others simply wished to acquire new skills. I affixed a sign above the entrance, Hope Studio. Every stitch holds a story. As I imparted the art of sewing to the young women, my mind was filled with memories of my mother. I recalled my years of hunger and the oppressive silence, and amidst the gentle hum of sewing machines, the snip of scissors, and the cheerful laughter, I experienced a profound emotion I had not felt in decades. Genuine pride. Zuri, her apron neatly tied, moved among the students, assisting them with threading their needles. She met my gaze and smiled. "See, Mum, it all began with a dress discarded in the rubbish." "No, my child," I corrected her. "It commenced much earlier, with a mother who never ceased her sewing, even when life itself tore the thread from her very hands." That afternoon, before closing the studio for the day, I framed the crimson thread. Beneath it, in my own hand, I inscribed a sentence. "In the end, all wounds heal if one possesses the courage to hold the needle with love." And as I hung it upon the wall, I comprehended that this thread did more than merely join disparate fabrics. It wove together generations, narratives, sorrows, and forgiveness. It was the invisible filament that connected me to my mother, my husband, my daughter, and indeed to all the women who had painstakingly sewn their destinies, with hands that bore wounds but hearts that remained unbroken. That evening, just before slumber, I held Kofi's worn journal for a final moment. Upon the very last page, inscribed in ink that had softened with time, was a single phrase I had previously overlooked. True affection, it seems, isn't solely woven with the visible strands of connection. At times it is intricately stitched with quiet acceptance, and at other moments with the profound quietude of one who anticipates being truly recognized in another existence. I closed the volume and extinguished the light. Then, enshrouded in the deep blackness, a tender yet serene smile graced my lips. As the understanding dawned, I had already been perceived. Several years have since unfolded since that celebratory union, since that pivotal night when personal pride and deep affection engaged in a silent contest, and ultimately, my inherent self-respect triumphed over the urge to remain unspoken. Today, my hair has turned to a complete cascade of white, and my hands bear a multitude of fine, delicate marks, much like the etched lines that chart the passage of time. Each one of these etchings holds a narrative, recounting a particular garment, a moment of sorrow, a hope that was painstakingly pieced back together. And though the weight of some days can feel considerable, my spirit feels lighter than it ever has. The Hope Studio continues to welcome patrons. It's a vibrant hub teeming with women who arrive carrying fractured dreams and discarded textiles, convinced of their own worthlessness. Yet, through unwavering patience and genuine care, they discover that everything, even that which appears irrevocably damaged, possesses the potential for renewal and transformation. What I now create are not merely garments. I am shaping and mending spirits. Each morning I draw open the windows, allowing the sun's rays to cast a warm glow upon the stacks of fabric resting on their shelves. The comforting aroma of cotton and freshly brewed coffee mingles with the cheerful sounds of the young apprentices at play. Occasionally I close my eyes simply to savor that symphony, the harmonious rhythm of work, accomplished with skill, of a present moment that no longer brings pain. Zuri has been a dedicated member of my team for 3 years now. Her role involves guiding the newcomers in the art of embroidery, a task she performs with enthusiasm, even if she still occasionally nicks her fingers, a minor inconvenience she endures with a bright smile. At times, as I observe her, I reflect on the crimson thread Kofi mentioned, the one that seemed so ethereal, and how it continues to weave its invisible path between us, binding what I once believed irrevocably lost. On certain mornings, she arrives before anyone else, bestows a gentle kiss upon my forehead, and declares, "Mum, I've learned that sewing is akin to offering a prayer with one's hands." A smile forms on my lips, for these were the very words my own mother would utter when I was a young girl. The patterns of life do indeed echo. However, when love is the guiding force, these recurring cycles transform from potential burdens into profound blessings. One particular Saturday afternoon, as we were engaged in tidying the studio, a young woman appeared, accompanied by a girl who appeared to be around 10 years of age. In her hands she clutched a piece of white fabric, visibly marked and somewhat torn. "Do you offer sewing instruction here?" she inquired with a touch of shyness. "Here, we teach the art of beginning anew," I responded, extending an invitation for her to enter. As I guided her through the space, pointing out the work tables and sewing machines, I observed the young girl's gaze fixated on the framed crimson thread displayed on the wall. She moved closer, examining it with evident curiosity, and then asked, "Can that thread also be used to fashion dresses?" I offered a smile. "No, little one," I replied gently. "That particular thread is reserved for mending that which cannot be seen." "Such as what?" she pressed, her eyes wide with inquiry. "For instances such as fractured hearts," I explained. The child regarded me with a serious expression, and for a fleeting moment I perceived within her gaze a mirrored reflection of Zuri's own youthful intensity. Time, I mused, possesses a peculiar tendency to return, that which we once relinquished, albeit through a different lens, perhaps to ascertain if this time we possess the wisdom to cherish it more dearly. That night, as I was preparing to close the studio for the day, Zuri approached me, an envelope in her hand. "Mum," she said, "this was delivered for you." The sender was identified as the Black Women's Entrepreneurial Coalition. Inside I found a letter, penned in a steady, confident script. "Afia Bakari," it began, "we have been observing your dedicated work at Hope Studio with great admiration. Your journey has served as a profound inspiration to countless women. We wish to present you with an award, recognizing your tireless efforts and for so powerfully demonstrating that dignity can be cultivated, stitch by careful stitch." Below this declaration was an invitation to attend a forthcoming event in the city. Zuri embraced me, tears welling in her eyes. "You truly deserve this, Mom," she whispered. I gently shook my head, a smile playing on my lips. "No, my dear, this honor is for all of us." On the day of the ceremony, I selected my finest attire, a gracefully simple cream-colored dress that I had fashioned myself. Zuri insisted on accompanying me, and as I stepped onto the platform, I felt the accumulated weight of years of sorrow begin to dissipate, like knots being untied. Before me sat a multitude of women, young, old, mothers, daughters, each bearing similar tales of hardship, self-sacrifice, and unspoken affection. Taking the microphone, I drew a deep breath. "I am, at my core, simply a seamstress," I began. "However, over the course of my life, I have come to understand that no fabric is so irrevocably torn that it cannot be restored, provided it is handled with steadfast patience and unwavering faith. And the most resilient thread, you see, is not the one that gleams brightest, but rather the one that endures." A lengthy, resonant wave of applause washed over me, a sensation that seemed to vibrate through my very being. As I descended from the stage, my eyes met those of Imani Ellington in the crowd. Her presence was unexpected. She approached with a measured pace, a bouquet of flowers in her hand. "I had a feeling you would achieve this, Afia," she said, her smile radiating genuine warmth. "No one truly accomplishes anything in isolation," I replied. "Progress is only made when we learn to weave with the assistance of others." Later that same evening, upon returning home, I discovered Zuri waiting for me on the patio, her daughter, my granddaughter Nia, by her side. The little girl was engrossed in playing with a length of crimson thread. "Look what I found in the studio, Grandma," she exclaimed, a bright smile on her face. "May I keep it?" I observed her for a moment. The thread seemed to shimmer, catching the moonlight. I nodded. "Of course, my darling," I said, "but promise me you will cherish it." "Why?" she inquired. "Because that thread symbolizes the bond shared by the women of this family. When you hold it, you are never truly alone." Nia carefully wound the thread around her wrist and resumed her play. Zuri looked at me, her eyes glistening. "Do you believe she will grasp its significance one day?" "Yes, my dear," I affirmed. "She will understand when she faces the task of mending her first heartbreak. That is when she will recognize that the crimson thread is more than a mere symbol. It is an inheritance." As time progressed, the studio flourished. Women journeyed from distant towns, and even young individuals who had never before handled a needle found their way to us. Some arrived bearing wounds that lay hidden beneath the surface, a betrayal, a profound loss, a hurtful utterance from their formative years. And each time someone new entered, I offered them the same counsel. Take an old piece of fabric and begin to stitch. Do not be discouraged if the thread snaps. I will show you how to rethread it. For, in essence, sewing is not solely about joining disparate pieces. It is about recognizing that even our missteps can create unique patterns, and that scars, much like those that mark a life lived fully, are tangible proof of having navigated existence with courage. During one particular winter, Imani fell gravely ill. Zuri and I made our way to visit her. She resided alone in a spacious yet somber dwelling. She greeted us, a comforting blanket draped over her lap, her expression serene. "I knew you would come," she murmured. "I wanted to bid you farewell." I clasped her hand. "You owe me nothing, Imani." "Oh, but Afia, you rescued me from myself. Never forget that." To Zuri, she added, "Your mother is one of those rare women, the kind who appear perhaps once in a century. Do not judge her resilience. It is merely her way of enduring without shattering." She passed away a few weeks later. In her final testament, she bequeathed a generous donation to Hope Studio. It was not an immense sum, but it was sufficient to ensure the studio's continued operation for many years to come. And within a small note, penned in a hand that had grown frail, she conveyed, "Thank you for using the thread of forgiveness to mend what I had torn asunder with my pride." Tears streamed down my face as I read her words, not from sorrow but from a profound sense of relief. I understood then that in the end each of us had fulfilled our part, she by seeking atonement and I by learning to release resentment. Today, as these reflections take shape on the page, I can hear Nia's joyful laughter echoing from the patio. She is diligently learning the craft of sewing from Zuri, employing the very crimson thread she discovered that memorable night. Her small, artless hands guide the needle with delicate precision, and though she occasionally pricks herself, her smile remains undimmed. That radiant smile is the most precious legacy I could ever impart. I watch her from the gentle sway of my rocking chair, contemplating how life, in its ultimate essence, closely resembles a length of fabric. Sometimes it becomes soiled, it tears, it stretches beyond its intended limits. But invariably, always, there exists a thread, ready and waiting to meticulously reassemble everything. I have been a seamstress, a wife, a mother, and now I am a mentor. I stitch together pieces of cloth, I mend torn emotions, and I shape destinies. And if there is one truth I have truly assimilated, it is that love is not exclusively communicated through embraces or spoken words. It is often most powerfully expressed in the quiet perseverance of one who, against all odds, continues to stitch. I close my eyes and recall that initial night, the very one when my daughter, in her youthful disdain, declared me impoverished and discarded the dress I had made. Had someone foretold then that this very incident would mark the inception of our collective salvation, I would never have credited their words. But now I understand that the most profound wounds do not appear to dismantle us, but rather to create openings through which light can enter. This shall be my final narrative, the last stitch to be executed by these hands which now tremble with age. Yet I harbour no apprehension, for I am confident that upon my departure, Zuri and Nia will continue the act of stitching, employing the same thread, weaving together the remnants of a legacy built on love, unwavering dignity, and enduring hope. And when the world attempts to diminish them, perhaps deeming them too humble or inclined to give generously without expectation of reward, they will recall my words. There exists no stitch more steadfast than that of a woman who has known profound sorrow. For she who has wept possesses the insight to hold the needle with the purest form of love. I offer a gentle smile, close my eyes, and allow the encompassing silence to envelop me. The crimson thread rests upon my lap, radiating a comforting warmth, vibrant as though it still pulses with an independent life force. And just as I begin to drift into repose, I believe I detect the soft, distant echo of my mother's voice, whispering, "You may find your rest now, my child. The final stitch has been made." At times people inquire if I would willingly traverse through all that I have endured once more, if I would subject myself to the indignities, the tears, the prolonged silences all over again. My answer invariably remains the same: yes, because each hurt taught me to stitch with amplified fortitude. Every instance of scorn instilled in me the resolve not to plead for affection, and every sleepless night served as a potent reminder that dignity is the sole essential garment that must never be relinquished. Today, as I examine my hands, I perceive within them the collective history of all women who, much like myself, learned the art of sewing not from choice, but from absolute necessity. Women who mended worn garments, soothed broken hearts, and held families together. Women who sought not applause, but rather earned respect, and who understood that true worth is not contingent upon material wealth. My studio continues to welcome all who seek its solace, and with every reverberation of a needle-piercing fabric, I sense life itself whispering to me that nothing was in vain. For even as the years inexorably march on, the crimson thread endures. It binds generations, it unites loves, and it interweaves countless stories. Did you find resonance in this tale, and from which city do you lend your ear? Let us engage in discussion within the comments section. If this narrative resonated with you, kindly consider offering your support through a super thanks, enabling me to continue sharing such stories. My sincerest gratitude for your generous and heartfelt encouragement. I eagerly anticipate your thoughts on the story. On your screen now, you will find 2 other life stories that I highly recommend. My channel offers a wealth of further content. Remember to subscribe. Until our next shared life story, with abundant love and deep respect.